All right, with Atom installed, it's time to work on our local first workflow in Git. So you might wonder, why bother starting local? Well, I actually prefer starting remote, since overall I think it's a little easier, and there's less setup. Starting remote to me is just less work. However, sometimes we do need or want to start locally. In some cases, you just are unsure of which remote you want to use. That is, you could decide later to use GitHub or Bitbucket or perhaps GitLab. Either direction is a personal choice. Another compelling reason is that we have a lot of existing source code. Although we could still use the remote first approach by simply copying and pasting into the repo once you've cloned that repo, and then adding all the files and then walking through the two-phase commit process. And then finally, committing all those changes to the remote repository. All right, let's look at starting local with a completely empty folder. Since in part 1 I did all my demonstrations using Windows 10, I'm changing things up a bit, and I'm going to be using Linux Mint for part 2. Partially, I'm doing this because I want to demonstrate that it doesn't matter which operating system you're on, the commands will be the same either way. All right, let me fire up my terminal, and I'll quickly walk through the steps that I initially walked through on part 1, where we set up a projects folder. I want to see if I have a projects folder already, which I do not. So let's go ahead and do that. mkdir projects, that's to create the projects folder. Now I have a projects folder, and let's go into it with the cd command. I use pwd to print the working directory. So now I have a projects folder underneath my user's home directory, which in Linux Mint is simply at /home/Jason, which is my username on this system. This is where we'll create our project. I'll initialize our project using the git command. Git init, and then the name of the project I want to create. I'll name this local-demo. Then press enter, and Git will initialize an empty repository in the folder you specified. Now if we do an ls here, we see that we have a local-demo project folder. And go into that directory. And once here, we can do an ls, and there are simply no files. That's because ls by default will not list any .dot folders or files. Let's fix that. We're going to do an ls-a. That lists all files and folders, including any that begin with a leading dot. You can see that we now have a .git folder. As we mentioned before, the .git folder is the actual repository. All right, well, let's actually add some files here. Before we do that, let's go ahead and do a git status. Since we have a .git folder, we're technically in a working folder of the Git repository. We can double check that by doing a git status. And this tells us that we're on the master branch, which even when we create a brand new Git repository without any commits yet, we get our master branch for free. And we don't have any commits yet, which is true. We haven't done anything yet. And currently, there's nothing to commit. That is, we haven't actually created any files yet. Let's go ahead and fix that. For my sample text, I want to leverage a website for some filler text. Now, it doesn't matter what websites you use. There's tons of them out there. I like using the Hipster Ipsum website. Simply do a search for Hipster Ipsum and find the website at the domain hipsum.co. Great, this looks like the correct site. Let's find our options. We have 5 paragraphs, which should be fine. It doesn't matter which type. If a hipster neat just has more hipster text in it, and hipster with shy of Latin, it interjects a few Latin phrases in here. And when you're ready, click on Beer Me. All right, let's scroll down and see our text. Cool. Now let's select the first paragraph and copy that text. And let's head back over to our terminal. Since we've already installed a really good text editor that is Atom, let's use Atom to create a first file. I'm going to call this hipster.txt. So Atom, space, and then file name. Great. Once Atom loads, it should note that we have an unsaved file. Once here, let's just go ahead and paste in the contents that we have in our clipboard. There we go. Now, let's go ahead and save these changes, and then exit out of Atom. We should now have our hipster.txt file on our system. Great. Now we have that file. Let's see what Git thinks of this. Great. We have an untracked file. As we've walked through in our part 1, this is all pretty familiar. The only difference here is that we don't have any commits yet, so we're actually working towards our first commit. Let's move forward through the two-phase commit process by adding the new file to our staging area. Git add, and then the name of the file, hipster.txt. Now, when I do a git status, we now have a new file. And as we've seen before, if we do a git ls-files, Git is now tracking the hipster.txt file. Let's move forward by committing our changes that are staged. Git commit -m, which allows me to do an inline commit message, adding new file, hipster.txt. Great. Now let's check out that commit. Git show head. We can see the commit ID and the author, which is myself, along with my email address, the date this commit happened, and my commit message. If I do an ls, you see that we have the hipster.txt file. If I do git status, we're back to a clean working directory on the master branch. So we have our first initial commit of our local repository. Well, let's keep going. Let's add a few more files. Let's head back over to our filler text, and I'm going to copy the next paragraph. And in this case, I'm just going to open Atom in the current directory. So Atom, space, and then simply a period. Because what I want to do is I want to create multiple files and maybe even edit the existing hipster text. With Atom open, I will right-click and do New File. Let's call this next.txt. Let's paste in the contents here. And let's save this file. Let's go back over to our web browser. Scroll down a bit. Grab the next paragraph. Copy that text. Let's create another file. Call this third.txt. Paste in that text and then save that file. Once again, back here, let's grab the next paragraph. Copy the text. This time I want to head back to the hipster.txt and simply add another line. In Atom, since it integrates very well with Git, kind of shows up in this yellowish orange color. followed by the green, which are signifying the new files. All right, with these changes in place, let's go ahead and close Atom. I scroll down a bit and then head back over to our terminal. All right. Let's do an ls. We can see the 3 text files that we have. And now if we do git status, we have 1 modified file and 2 untracked files. That is 2 files that are new to Git that we have not added to Git's tracking yet. All right, well, let's fix that. We can do this by adding all these changes all at once by a slight tweak to our add command. So git add, and to add all the files that are new or newly modified, we can simply use a period. Now, let me clear. Now if I do git status, all 3 changes are now in the staging area. We have our newly modified hipster.txt, and then the 2 new files we just added. Now you might be wondering, why are we using the add command for a file that already exists? Well, the way I like to look at it is that we're adding the changes, not necessarily the file. All right, now let's continue. We're doing git commit. And this time, I'm going to throw a little twist in it. Instead of doing the inline commit, I'm going to just leave off the -m and the commit message. And if Atom is correctly configured to be our text editor for Git, then Atom should be launched, allowing us to use Atom as our commit editor. Great. Once Atom is open, you'll notice that we actually have a special file loaded into Atom. It's the commit_edit msg, or message. This special file is what's used to capture the commit message with the default editor. Also, as part of this, it's already pre-populated within comments the last status command. So I move this out of the way. You can tell that the contents of what's been commented out is the exact same contents of our last status command. This is useful because it kind of reminds us what's currently in the staging area. But don't worry, everything that's in comments will not actually be part of the commit message. It's just there for your benefit, so you're kind of reminded of what's going on, so you can make a more meaningful commit message. Like we've done before, using the text editor to do a commit message allows us to do multi-line commit messages. All right, once you're done with the commit message, save, and then quit Atom. Once Atom is closed, you'll return to the terminal, and Git will use the contents of that special file we edited inside of Atom as the commit message. However, it looks a little weird here because the way it's displayed, it's all just run together. We can still double check to make sure that the line endings did get preserved. We could do that with the git show command, git show, and this time I'll simply use the name of the branch I'm on, which is master. And like we've seen before, we have the commit ID, the author, the date, and then indented our commit message, which is spread across 4 lines, just like we typed it in the Atom text editor. All right, let's quit out of here. And I want to do one more commit. I'm going to go back to my web browser and copy the last paragraph. Then return, and we're going to open up that hipster file again. Atom, hipster.txt. I'm going to go to the end of the line. I'm going to go to the end of the file and paste in the contents of my clipboard. save the file, and then exit. So one more little trick that we can do here is we can use something called the express commit. If we do git status, we see that we have changes detected on hipster.txt. But since we changed an existing file, we can use a little faster way of committing our changes. If we do git commit -a, it will pass our hipster.txt file through the staging area and then directly into the Git repository as a commit. I'm also just going to do an inline commit message. So I could do a -m as well, along with my commit message. However, I can also combine these two options together. So I can do a, m, and then my commit message. Showing express commit. Great, now I have inserted the last line into the hipster.txt file. And I can show that on the git show command. All right, I'm going to clear. Now, the last little bit I want to do here is something that might look counterintuitive. If I do an ls, I have 3 files that are here, which is useful. But what I want to do is I want to save these files off as a different repository for later on. So I'm going to kill 2 birds with 1 stone. I'm actually going to remove this repository. If I do an ls-a, I see that I have the .git folder. That folder, if it were to disappear, this folder would no longer be controlled by Git. If I do git status, I see that I'm on the master branch. I have nothing to commit and a clean working tree. I'm able to get that response from Git because I'm currently in a Git repository. However, if we remove the .git folder, so I do an rm-rf .git, let's confirm it's gone by doing ls-a. This time we don't have the .git folder any longer. Now if I do a git status, now I get an error from Git because I'm no longer in a Git repository. Now, of course, this is going to wipe out any history that we already created. That's okay because I'm setting us up for our next example. All right, let's clear. I'm going to back out to the projects folder.